So now we are going to formally start our business meeting, and I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Education to order. It's Tuesday, April 6th, 2021, and the Portland Board of Education is meeting via Zoom. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Présente.
Mr. Burke?
Here.
Mr. Irish?
Here.
Senor Rodriguez?
Presente.
Ms. Russell Better?
Here.
Ms. Thompson? Ms. Trevorrow?
Here.
Mr. Youssef?
Here.
Ms. Allen?
Here.
Ms. Boxer McCumber?
Here.
Ms. Chung?
Here.
Ms. Hill?
Here.
Ms. Yangala?
Yes, I'm here.
And Chair Figdor.
Here. Okay, now would everyone please unmute yourselves for the Pledge of Allegiance? And we can get started as soon as we see that flag. There we go. All right. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
Flag.
of the United States of America. And to
the republic
for
which
which
it
it stands,
stands,
one nation,
under
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty,
and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everyone. The next thing on our agenda is taking public comment. So this is the portion of our meeting where we're taking public comment on issues that are not on our agenda tonight. So if there's any member of the public who would want to speak on an issue that's not on our agenda tonight, you can use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom, either on the webinar control bar at the bottom of your screen or by selecting your name on the participant screen. And I see one member of the public, so I'm just going to go ahead and remind people about the rules for doing this. So I'll call you using your Zoom name. Please state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Should you near the 3-minute mark, I'll see if additional time is needed, and an additional 3 minutes may be granted by board consent. All right, so let's get started. And Steve Scharf, you have 3 minutes to address the board. You can go ahead now.
Stephen Scharf of Brackett Street. I want to speak to one other fiscal issue that's not part of your budget. It was discussed at I think it was your last finance committee meeting, that you are seeking to sell the central office building as basically you don't need it really because you're mostly working out of homes, etc. It was a fiscal mistake to ever buy that building. Quite frankly, made no sense for you to buy a building in downtown Portland when we had plenty of space in our schools for you to operate your central office out of. But to try and sell that building in the current market is even going to be a bigger mistake. First of all, I want you to fully understand that it's not going to be your call, really. Once you declare the building no longer needed for educational purposes, you'll take a vote to that effect at some point. It then reverts over to the city of Portland for this city council to handle the disposition of the building. You have no control over it once you've declared it no longer needed for educational purposes. And that's by state law. That's how the state law is written. But the problem is the current market. The reason you don't need it is because you're not using it for staff. And just like every office building in downtown Portland is mostly empty because people are working out of their homes. Nobody really needs a building like yours. So it's going to be very difficult to sell it. It's one of those things that, yes, this current board did not vote to buy the building, but it's one of those things that when you are looking forward, it's like, is this really the decision to be made? Are we making the right decision? And the problem with the Portland School Board over the years, as it has continually made these wrong decisions in terms of buildings, in terms of just capital costs that just, saddle you with long-term financial issues. And so going forward, you really need to think carefully about what you are using our city funds for operating the school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Is there anyone else, any other member of the public who would like to speak to the board on an issue that is not on our agenda tonight? If so, you can go ahead and use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Okay, seeing no other hands, I'm going to close public comment. And now we are on to the report of the chair. And for my report tonight, I want to express my deep gratitude to Superintendent Batana and his team for their tireless work on the FY22 budget. It's always an intense and challenging time of the year when we consider the budget. And this year we're doing it during a pandemic and at the very same time that we're increasing in-person school for all grade levels, which is extraordinarily complex in and of itself. I also want to reflect upon how this year the budget process feels different to me than in previous years that I've been on the board, or before that when I was closely following the budget as a community member and activist. There's so much focus, clarity, and coherence in this budget. It's the direct outgrowth of the core work that we've been doing as a board and as a district, from providing transportation to our pre-K students, to implementing our new harassment and discrimination policy, to meeting our legal and moral obligations to better serve our English language learners. For that, I want to thank Superintendent Batana for his vision, determination, and stamina. And also I want to thank the board for your deep listening, learning, and willingness to do the hard thing and to embrace change. Inequity has been the elephant in the room in our district for a long time, and this budget says no more. I couldn't be more proud of the work that we're doing together. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the report of the students. Tonight, Abby Hill will provide an update from Portland Arts and Technology High School. Abby, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, I am the student representative for the PATHS program at Cascade Bay High School. So right now we're trying to continue the enrollment for next year, and we're working on the anticipation that school will be in person. And students from surrounding schools will continue to do virtual tours of the programs, and they have also shown very strong interest in enrolling, which is fantastic. And PATHS is also working on graduation plans, which unfortunately a traditional graduation will most likely not be able to happen for most programs. But instructors have been thinking of alternatives, ways to acknowledge the hard work that graduating and or non-returning students have put in the past effort, or put in for the past year. Many programs have been able to offer person contact, while there are some that have not been able to. I'm sorry, I just got all messed up there. Well, some that have been able to not do that because of in-person increased risk. Online programs continue to find ways to engage with students during such strange times. It is safe to say that we will hope to be passing the following guidelines will help to move us forward during this pandemic, and we will be able to offer full in-person learning next year. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Abby. Really
Thank you.
Now, the superintendent has the challenging opportunity to speak after you. Superintendent, it's time for your report, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's never easy. So Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand. The Maliseet, Wolastoqiyik, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy, or people of the Dawnland. We're honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and the district is committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and classrooms. You may have noticed that this land acknowledgement is different from our previous one. You will note that we are using the name Wolastoqiyik. The Maliseet in Canada have reclaimed their traditional name, and so we are using that. We have also stated our commitment to telling and making the Wabanaki people's stories an important and visible part of our work. I would like to thank Fiona Hopper, our social studies teacher leader, for her guidance in these revisions. As she has in all of our work in this important area, Fiona worked closely with Indigenous colleagues to make these revisions. In what is becoming a spring tradition in PPS, I would like to extend my congratulations to Deering High School debate team advisors, Ms. Callahan and Ms. Simonis, and the amazing debate team students. A couple of weeks ago, our very own DHS board rep, Emily Chung, and Balkis Mohammed competed in the national qualifying speech and debate tournament for the National Catholic Forensic League. Our stellar Deering debaters placed first overall in public forum, besting teams from Phillips Exeter, Falmouth High School, Cape Elizabeth High School, and Lincoln Academy, among others. Emily and Balkis are going to nationals. The NCFL National Tournament will be held virtually, unfortunately, over Memorial Day weekend. This outstanding performance is added to their already long lists of academic and other achievements. So congratulations, Balkis and Emily, the rest of the team, and all of the DHS family. I would also like to recognize our Make It Happen program for being named the Magna Award winner for districts between 5,000 and 20,000 students by the National School Boards Association. Make It Happen, as many of you know, is a program that identifies first-generation students and helps them to aspire to and understand what they need to do to be competitive college applicants. For over 10 years, hundreds of students have been able to build their college profiles through pursuing rigorous academic experiences, preparing for college admissions, and participating in co-curricular and outside of school activities that highlight their potential. Central to the Portland Public Schools promise is the idea that we prepare and empower students for the next step. Nothing we do is more clearly aligned to this promise than what Make It Happen has been doing for those 10 years. Committed program leadership from program coordinator Tim Cronin and his team, some of whom are with us today. Talented students and community volunteers have made this program worthy of this highest recognition from our peers across the country. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the person who started this all, our Communications and Community Partnerships Executive Director, Grace Valenzuela. Grace saw the unbelievable potential in our students and recognized that it would go unrealized without dedicated support. And so she started this program and has kept it going through good times and bad. And as a result, hundreds of students have found pathways to better outcomes than they otherwise would have. I'm so very proud of all the Make It Happen team, our students in the Portland community that has so generously supported these efforts. So congratulations, Make It Happen. You guys are amazing. And I think, Grace, you probably have a video because it seems like every time I talk to you, you have a video. And I also would love for you to just acknowledge some of the amazing people that you work with.
I'll start first with a video if I can share my screen, but I'm not allowed to share my screen.
Did you want to share the video you shared with me?
Yes, please, Greg. Yeah, it will be great if you will do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Make It Happen is fun and energetic.
Having a better future.
A very safe environment.
Leadership, leadership, leadership.
Excellence, inspiration,
Effective,
and supportive.
Make It Happen is success.
Success.
shooting up and above.
It's like make it happen, need to spread widely.
I'm originally from Iraq, but I used to live in Ukraine. I recently moved to the United States, and I didn't know how things worked in school or what classes to choose and where to go to if I need help.
We're in the same class, and we're at that stage of middle school where we're ready to move on to high school, make a transition, but then we didn't know how to, and that's when Make It Happen came in.
I come from a big family, and my parents are not educated in America. They never attended school even back in Sudan. So when I came here, they were not used to the American system of education. If I needed help in school, they were not able to help me with homework or other services. So getting a tutor was really good for me. Getting a tutor was great.
What Make It Happen helped me improve was on my test, and that was mostly vocabulary work. And I learned from time to time that I was a visual learner.
The program offered me guidance and support whenever I needed it. It was always there. I could go in and get help whenever I wanted. Bishop College requires supplementary essay. So beside my personal essay for the Common App, I have to write the supplement essay for the college I'm applying to. We are applying to 10 schools, so which means that I have to write 10 essays or more than that.
I don't think the kids ever felt like they really belonged to something. So what we tried to do from day one is to start to build a little community, but moreover to connect with each other and to connect with us. And then when the kids started to connect, they started to plug into our program more. They started coming by.
When I think of the Make It Happen program, I think of a very safe environment and a place where people come together, people of different race, like different ethnicities come together, and they help each other get through like the academic stuff. And I think they're like basically your friends, and without friends you can't really get through school.
Well, I would define Make It Happen as an innovative program, an empowering program, and a very effective program. I use those words because Make It Happen gives every person an opportunity to showcase what they can do, and it pushes you and gives you the drive to give it your all.
Make it happen.
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 Thank you. That video was produced a while back, not at the start, but maybe midway in terms of the program. Maybe that was a 2010 or 11 video. And I don't know if you recognize some of the students. They're already contributing members in our community. At Portland Public Schools, we are committed to advancing equity, and MIH is one example that demonstrates this commitment in finite terms. We understand that true progress in our quest to advance equity will rely on disrupting status quo as we know it. Make It Happen is a great example of what is possible when students are given voice and agency to be proactive in their own path to success. The hard work and commitment to truly show up requires the same work ethic and mindset that lead to success. Courage, resilience, perseverance, and a deeper sense of connection to family and community. I want to acknowledge the staff members instrumental in making the vision a reality. Any leader can dream up grand visions and goals, but without talented and dedicated staff who are committed to equity, and educational justice, it's going to be difficult to achieve it. Make It Happen wouldn't have been a successful and award-winning program. On behalf of our students, current and former, and their families, thank you to all the staff for the work that they do above and beyond. I also want to thank our Superintendent Butana, who came to the district 5 years ago with his vision of equity. He is tenacious in addressing systemic racism and prioritizes moves focused on diversity, inclusion, and equity. We are also blessed with having a school board that shares this commitment. Together, this powerful partnership enabled us to secure local funding for Make It Happen and staffing and resources. I'm not sure if you know that the program was started as a grant funded, and we have seeded money through grants. Thank you to the Portland Board of Public Education for their support collectively and individually, specifically for former board member Marnie Marioni and current board member Miki Bondo for joining our cadre of volunteer academic coaches at Make It Happen. And thank you to the National School Board Association for this amazing recognition. It's a great honor for Maine and for Portland Public Schools. And I want to turn it over to Tim Cronin, who is our leader, amazing leader of the program. Tim?
Tim, you're muted.
Okay, minor detail. Thank you, everybody, so much for having us, and thank you to Grace and Javier and the whole school board. I wanted to take 2 seconds to say that it's a pretty big deal, this award, in that the National School Board Association has considered us and selected us, in that we're being considered as a program that levels the playing field in providing such critical access to educational resources and support for multilingual students. If that's not a big deal, I'm not sure what is. From the day we got here, and I'm afraid that I'm going to thank some of the same people Grace just did, but just to hit home, Javier, from the day you arrived, you were welcoming. You were welcoming to taking us in and making it possible for us to proliferate. And if you weren't there, I'm not sure we would have had any success, if at all. The school board over the years have just been 100% supportive. I can't think of any instance where the school board has not supported us from the point we started. And without your support, no way would we have made it, because we started out with being grant funded, as Grace had mentioned, but now we've transitioned over the last 3 or 4 years. I hope through our credibility to being funded by the district completely as of this year. It's no small development. Hats off to Grace as being the originator and the progenitor of this program, coming up with the idea after speaking with a kid about how the kid said, we need this program. And she brought it to fruition, and a woman named Jane Armstrong took it under her belt and developed it to the point where the kids were ready for high school. She works for central office now, and she was a big part of the program in the beginning and set us up for success. Hats off to the school principals, Derek Pierce, Allison Dame, Abdullahi Ahmed, and Sheila Jepson, who welcomed Make It Happen right off the bat and have enabled us to operate and coordinate our efforts, with staff to help our students to proliferate, and have supported us unconditionally. But the real heavy hitters are our Make It Happen site coordinators, Sarah Hassan at Cascade Bay High School, Leah Dixon at Deering, and Daniel Wong at Portland. And what they do is they make themselves highly accessible and easy to connect with so that students can proliferate. Our success, if at all, has been directly associated with the day-to-day work in the trenches through thick and thin of our site coordinators to get our students to realize and maximize their potential. It's not always easy because they're kind of like nice tiger moms in that they, they have to talk about whether or not students are reaching their potential and to basically point out that there might be shortcomings and that they model success every day, and it's not easy to attain that standard every day. Our site coordinators exercise direct impact, and they influence a ton of students' lives and they've succeeded in creating a sense of belonging and a hub for academic excellence for so many kids. I think we're in our 11th year at the high school level, and it's really kind of cool how many kids have graduated from high school, come back to the community, or we hear about their successes and how they're changing the world. Not just in the sense of that they're successful with their professions, but it's also the impact they're making on their communities, and including Portland. And I think that many of them have civic and professional profiles that are really focused on trying to make the world a little better place. With respect to college admission, our site coordinators, they've been instrumental in getting 99% of our kids, the vast majority of them, secure admission and financial aid. It's really important in that they help kids to find the money to go without indebting themselves and making prudent decisions. The fact of the matter is that our site coordinators, Leah Dixon, Sarah Hassan, and Danielle Wong, their service counts and matters, it really matters, and hats off to them. Critically, our students are just astounding. Whenever you work with them, you're usually walking away with this feeling and this sense that I'm in the presence of grace. Not every day. Everybody has their days and moments. But the truth is, whenever you set up kids for success, they usually rise to the occasion and they take full advantage of the opportunity. Sometimes they run with it to the point where you're astounded at their capacity that they may not even know they had. And typically they have tons of heart and soul. And just a heads up and a shout out to you, because we're so proud of you. Our community volunteers, you wouldn't believe it. Some of them have been serving for over 10 years. One woman named Ann Sawchuk, she's on her second leg of a 7-year tour where she picked up kids in middle school and walked them right to the college door, and then picked up another series of 7th graders. Guy named Todd Ramaj Healy, he's been here so long, I'm not sure how old he is, but he's been serving our kids probably for the last 11 years. But those are just two of them. And our coaches we call them our coaches. They're our volunteer academic tutors. And they've really gone the distance during COVID because they're tutoring remotely this year. And I can't say it's a holiday for them, but they haven't skipped a beat, and our students have received the critical support they need. It's important to recognize a woman named Nanette Dyer-Blake, who you all know because she puts everything together for everybody, and she's behind the scenes and sets up all of our volunteers. I know she knows everybody at central office because she's always helping everybody. She also sets up most of the events that I'm aware of in the district, and she shines a great spotlight on our students and families and saves everyone's neck. A big hats off to Nanette Dyer-Blake. I also want to recognize our partners like the Telling Room and Ripple Effect, Seeds of Peace, but there's just so many that we could, we work with 40 odd some odd partners who pro bono work with our kids to bring fabulous professional and civic engagement opportunities to our students and to help them enhance their civic profiles, which in turn, and their professional profiles, which in turn make Portland, Maine, and the United States a better place to live. And hopefully those students can exercise influence so that they change the world to make it a little better place. And finally, hats off to the people who deserve the most credit, and that's the parents. And thanks for raising such fabulous kids and for being for them every day. And that's it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. Mr. Superintendent, I don't want to take your floor, but I do see a couple of board members who have their hands up. Can we take their questions or comment?
Absolutely.
Okay. Ms. Bondo.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, to allow me to make that comment, because I cannot be silent with the good news of the making happen, because I just want to say it loud. Thank you to Grace and thank you to Tim, to the great, amazing achievement, and we're going there. Because 9 years ago, I was one of the volunteer coach mentor for the making happen. So I am so proud, because when I joined the team those years back, I knew exactly that the making happen, it was a transformative, effective program who really can make an impact for those achievement gaps than we've been seeing in the public school. And then when I see the results has spoken right now, and I feel like, okay, we're moving to the right direction. And I just want our board to consider, because right now, the making happen is just going into the high school level. Back then, we used to start from the middle school. And I think that's the most transitional place where our students need the most help to move the change forward. And I think I just want to advocate a piece. Can we look about in the future how we can, going back to have that making happen, going back to the middle school, where we can have a game change for the achievement gap from there, and moving our students to that direction, then they can just succeed, not only in public school, not only in Maine, any global stage, because we give them the tool, we're bringing opportunities to our students where they are. So thank you, make it happen. Thank you to my great team. I'm part of that great team, and I'm so emotional, exciting to see that exactly what I have believed in it is the result that we accomplish, all of us together. Thank you. And I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Rodriguez. And thank you so much, Ms. Bondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. Also, I don't want to take up too much of the time, but I like Mickey said, I could not stay silent either, and not acknowledge this amazing recognition. I've had the pleasure of attending the National School Board Association's annual conferences over the last several years, and when the Magna Award videos, are presented, or the awards are presented and the videos are played, is usually in this massive arena where all of the attendees are gathered. So literally thousands of school board members from around the country watching these awards be given. Now, unfortunately, this year we won't have that physically, but I wanted to give you an idea of how number one, how difficult it is to be recognized at this level, how meaningful it is, and how special you have to be to stand out from the thousands of districts across this country that are doing incredible work, right? So kudos to everyone in the group, and so many people have already been mentioned. I wanted to just highlight one last thing. I remember that budget where we transitioned from grant funding to our local funding, and I remember that budget had a lot of potential cuts that were being considered, and I remember that there was a lot of pressure to lower that budget. And there was a lot of sacrifices that were made at that budget. And I remember the youth development programs being the level of advocacy, and we protected those youth development programs in that budget. We back then knew the value that they had. We knew that it was special. And we had Grace Valenzuela telling us, listen, we've been doing this. This is worth it. Like if we risk this, if we don't move this to our local budget and we risk losing this, the value is gone. And so think about that in the context of this year's budget, right? The risk of losing something of great value if you don't secure it into your budget. And a few years later, national recognition, because the value just shines so bright that it's impossible to ignore it. So I just wanted to thank everyone again for all the hard work, and great to hear everyone speak so well of the program. Super proud of it. Just keep it up. We're so proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez. And thank you so much, Tim and Grace and the whole team and Superintendent, handing it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, thank you, Grace and Tim and the whole team. We are incredibly proud of you. So moving along, I would like to remind everyone that we have yet another national champion in the making. Donna Colello, our outstanding head custodian at Ocean Avenue Elementary School, is one of 10 finalists in the Custodian of the Year competition sponsored by Cintas. Unlike the great state of Georgia, Cintas encourages everyone to vote often, once a day through April 16th. I can't think of anyone more deserving of this honor than Donna, so please continue to support her candidacy by voting for her at www.custodianoftheyear.com. No ID necessary, only need to verify that you are not a robot. And then we'll move on to our school reopening update. Today's school reopening update continues our practice of bringing updates to the board on developments in our school reopening plan. As many of you know, 10th through 12th grade students are returning to in-person instruction, starting with students at Cascade Bay High School who started yesterday. Deering and Portland High School students in those grades, 10 through 12, will return to in-person instruction 2 days a week starting next Monday. We will also be updating you on our plans to increase in-person instruction for our students in grades pre-K through 8 at these at these grades. We will be bringing students back for 4 days of in-person instruction starting after the April break. This has been a long road, and this wouldn't be possible without the work of so many, including, of course, our school leaders, our principals, and our school leadership teams, along with our district and support department staff, our folks in HR and finance and communication, technology, facilities, transportation, and food service. Also, our health and safety committee with representation from our teacher and educational technician collective bargaining units have been thoughtful and committed partners, and I would like to thank that team led by PA President Carrie Foster and EdTech President Michelle Lawless and their teams for their tireless dedication. Our school nurses and all of the teachers and other school staff who have worked and continue to work tirelessly with a can-do attitude to figure out the significant challenges that need to be overcome. We're looking forward to continuing our work towards more in-person time for our students and staff as we look ahead to next year and what will hopefully be a year that leaves many of these challenges behind. We will be sharing details about the work that has happened and what yet needs to happen in the coming weeks. We will also update you on our spring co-curricular plans and Portland Adult Education's school reopening plans. I recognize the work of many that has gone into where we are today, but I would like to especially thank Assistant Superintendents Aaron Townsend and Malia Nally. They have carried the responsibility of managing and coordinating all of the many resources and ideas that have been in play to make this scale up of in-person instruction possible in a challenging environment. They have had to make sense of the competing interests and demands by leading with data and evidence, bringing people together and keeping an unwavering eye on advancing our culture as an organization in the midst of all of these forces. So with gratitude, I would like to turn it over to Malia and Aaron to lead tonight's briefing.
Great. Thank you so much, Superintendent Botana, for all those acknowledgements and echo many of them for everybody across the organization and our partners who've helped us get to this point, and we're excited about the next steps in terms of increasing in-person instruction and the early returns from the experience of Monday and Tuesday at Cascade Bay give us just further encouragement of just kind of the benefit of being together that students and teachers are having, and looking forward to that across our system. So we'll share a bit of our presentation and I'll open up with a few comments and then turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Nally. All right. So just to ground us in where we began this journey almost a year ago in envisioning this school year, we identified the following, the guiding principles you see here for the planning and implementation of our school reopening plans. Consistent with the Portland Promise, we have worked to keep equity at the center of all of our decisions, and we have approached our planning with keeping safety and student and staff wellness as essential for this year. We have worked to have plans that were agile and allowed us to respond to a constantly evolving context, and we sought to have coherence across the district to support students, families, and staff as they adjust to these new and evolving circumstances. We have worked to support our overall district culture and sense of collective efficacy in doing this incredibly hard work this year has demanded of us. These principles guided our initial planning and continue to be important guides in our planning as for increasing in-person instruction in the close of the year. As you may remember, when we brought forward the reopening plan in August, the board authorized the superintendent and staff to manage our programming across these different scenarios so that we could make adjustments as needed, consistent with our overall goals and the guiding principles I spoke about in the last slide. Tonight's updates of our programming are consistent with this authorization. Excuse me. As we've recapped and communicated, why are we considering increasing in-person learning at this time? First, we want to acknowledge that conditions have improved. We are down considerably from the peak number of cases during our winter surge. Additionally, the availability of vaccines for educators and now all adults is a game changer. Also, we have seen that we have been able to keep students and staff safe through the worst of the pandemic. Our layers of prevention work, and we are confident we can continue to adhere to them in this transition. Also, over time, we have seen the increasing negative effects of remote learning on students, while at the same time seeing the positive benefits of in-person learning for our students on their in-person cohort days, or for those students we have prioritized who have had 4 days of in-person learning, including our intensive English learner students and some of our special ed program students. And understandably, locally, as well as regionally and nationally, there's community demand for increased in-person instruction as the pandemic has worn on and it has taken its toll on all of us. As you see in this slide, you can see the number of cases by month in Portland Public Schools over the course of this year. This indicates, that we have come down, as stated, from our peak in January of 73 cases in the district during the month of January. We are now back at about levels that we were in November when we were last considering an increase to in-person instruction. This slide here shows data from a recent staff vaccination survey that Human Resources conducted. So we have had approximately 40% of our staff respond to this point, and this shows that there has been significant progress towards getting our staff vaccinated. In this sample, almost 90% of staff are in progress towards being fully vaccinated. And in a subsequent question in the survey, an additional 4% indicated that they will be getting it soon. So this kind of data continues to bolden our confidence that the conditions have improved and make this the right time for in-person instruction. Additionally, as we've shared this data point, this is an example of how the pandemic has impacted our students, and particularly our most historically underserved communities. As you can see in this graph, almost all student groups have experienced an increase in chronic absence this year as compared to last year pre-pandemic. And those students most impacted, our Latinx students and our Black students, have been most impacted by this change. Unfortunately, these same patterns are consistent when we look at the impacts for students who are English language learners, those who have IEPs, or those who qualify for free and reduced lunch. As a result, we believe the time is now to increase in-person instruction. Offering in-person school is the most significant intervention we can provide to interrupt these patterns. Now, I'd like to pass it off to Assistant Superintendent Nolly to share how we developed our plans for increasing in-person instruction and to provide an overview of our elementary and middle school plans.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share a little bit about our process for getting input on how we will be increasing in-person learning time across grade spans. And then, like Assistant Superintendent Townsend mentioned, we'll start to get into some of the specifics at each grade span level. So as for our process, you will recall that we've been working on a three-pronged approach to improving our hybrid model. Increasing in-person learning was one of the three strategies we've been pursuing. We generated 5 different prototypes for how we could increase the amount of in-person learning. As we've shared before, this included increasing the length of the day, adding more days, and considering these moves with different permutations, such as for targeted groups and for all. We sought feedback from staff, students, and parents in order to land our final decisions about our approach. Specifically, we worked with our administrators to engage their leadership teams at every school. Different schools approached this input process in different ways. Some surveyed their full faculty. Others encouraged staff to reach out to members of the leadership team in advance of school-based discussions. And some had open input posters on their walls for educators to add comments and suggestions. This process helped to illuminate the challenges we'd need to overcome with any model, and it surfaced some creative solutions. And it helped us to see that people were in different places in terms of their thinking and preferences for how to increase in-person learning. At the last meeting, I shared that at one school, 80% of the educators said they'd prefer to come back for 4 days with all students, while at another school, only 10% of educators ranked this option high. In looking more deeply at the comments and the feedback, it was clear that much of the concern was about the feasibility of pulling it off with the existing parameters, as well as a desire to continue prioritizing additional time and support for students furthest from opportunity. This helped us hone in on the problems we need to solve for in order to maximize in-person learning to the greatest extent possible. We've also been meeting weekly with the PEA Health and Safety Committee to discuss any health and safety and working conditions issues. And so via those ongoing meetings, we were able to discuss the ideas and emerging plans with the PEA. Additionally, we sought out student feedback at the high school level via focus groups. We made sure these groups included students representing different perspectives and experiences. As Aaron will describe in more detail, the input from these focus groups had a significant impact on the adjustments that were made to the high school plans. Finally, we've been tracking family feedback via a combination of looking at the data we get from the POSIP survey, keeping track of the volume of input we receive from parents via direct outreach to the superintendent, principals, and board, and finally via some targeted focus groups with multilingual families. So we will start with a summary of where we've landed at the elementary level. We will be combining cohorts in order to bring all students back 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. We will maintain the current start and end times that we've been using all year. Wednesday will remain a remote learning day, and we'll continue to leverage this time for targeted supports for students who are least engaged and need additional support to get or stay on track. We'll also continue to carve out time for teachers to plan, collaborate, and engage in professional learning on Wednesdays. Molly Myers has been working with community partners to adapt the schedule, to adapt our programs to the schedule changes. Several programs have confirmed that they can adjust their programming to align with the new schedule. In some cases, we've confirmed transportation solutions for the midday transitions. And in other cases, we do not yet have firm solutions for transporting students to these programs, but we're in the process of exploring what's possible. Some programs are planning to continue their programming as is, and we remain in conversation with them about how the adjustments to the school schedule will mesh with their offerings. Rec will run programming after school as usual. However, we do have waiting lists at a few schools. Their biggest barrier to expanding more slots is hiring more staff, and they've been working on creative solutions to recruit more staff. Our goal is to initiate this change right after the April break on the 26th. We'll continue to communicate regular status updates to ensure families are aware of what's happening and are in the loop if for some reason we need to adjust that due date or date due to not having what we need in order to pull this off safely. Next, in terms of the middle schools, their plan is very similar to the elementary plan. We'll be combining cohorts and moving to 4 days a week of in-person learning, keeping with the same hours. We'll also keep Wednesdays as remote days and leverage the flexibility of that time to provide more targeted support for students who need that. We have the same target start date of April 26th, the Monday after April break. Some of you may be wondering why we landed on the 4-day model, keeping the same start and end times. And so we wanted to speak to our rationale very directly. As we looked at the various prototypes and the feedback we received from our stakeholders, it was clear that our goal was to maximize in-person learning to the greatest extent possible, while ensuring we were setting ourselves up to be able to actually implement those changes with a tight timeline. The 4-day model offers a meaningful increase of in-person instruction when compared to several of the other models on the table, such as extending the days within the cohorts or adding time for only targeted students. It also represents a significant mid-course adjustment and is pushing our teams to the max. When we considered adjusting the schedule back to our typical day on all 4 days, we came to see that operationalizing that change would be significantly more complex, and we did not feel confident we could pull it off well. For example, Aaron will be speaking to the additional resources we need to invest to make this adjustment. Right now, we are needing to hire 53 additional short-term staff, which he'll explain. If we moved to the full day schedule, we'd need to hire approximately 35 to 40 additional staff on top of that at the elementary level to provide for the necessary supervision during lunch and teacher planning. And many of these positions are our hardest to staff building aid roles. We also contemplated adding back in-person time on Wednesdays, but came across several operational challenges, including the possibility that many of our teachers would request remote accommodations on those days due to the childcare arrangements they've set up for the year. Furthermore, we wanted to continue to carve out deliberate time in our schedule that would be dedicated additional targeted supports for students who truly need it. By maintaining Wednesday as a remote day, we were able to maintain that equity-centered focus while still providing a meaningful increase of in-person time for all students. Finally, we believe this adjustment gives us the opportunity to grow our capacity to bring all students back full-time in the fall, if the conditions allow, which we are sincerely hoping that they do. And Aaron will speak now to the high school model.
Thanks, Malia. For our high school plans, as we have shared, we have transitioned from our initial proposal to a more traditional 2-day hybrid model for all grades 9 through 12. I want to thank our student board reps for helping to coordinate the focus groups that Malia mentioned with a diverse set of their peers from their schools for the feedback around those initial proposals. It was invaluable in shaping the plan in front of us that we're moving forward with. The in-person time will focus on students' core instructional classes at all schools. As the superintendent mentioned, Cascade Bay initiated their increased schedule yesterday, and Portland and Deering are prepared to begin their new schedules on Monday, April 12th, the start of the fourth quarter. At the high school level, we've worked with each school to develop a plan that accounted for their specific needs and their approach to supporting remote learners. We work to support the staff on the ground who will be leading this work to have a plan that worked best for their students and for them. I'll provide a brief overview of each of the school's plans. So at Cascade Bay, their initial increase has students in grades 9 and 10 in person on Monday and Tuesday, and grades 11 and 12 in person on Thursday and Friday. Their schedule is divided up by crew into an AM session and a PM session with an overlap in the middle of the day for full crew activities together. They're supporting their fully remote students through a Wednesday remote block and then integrated their other classes as necessary. Their launch date, as we've said, was this past Monday and have had 2 successful days thus far with their 9th and 10th graders. The Cascade Bay plan as well considers an additional increase of in-person time in early May after their week of intensives which is a Cascade Bay tradition that follows spring break, in which then they would increase so that all students, they would maintain the AM PM schedule, and all grades would be in person on during the morning, and then the other half by crew in the afternoon, to have comparable in-person time to Deering and Portland High. At Deering, they have a traditional cohort A and B schedule divided by alphabet that has been similar to what we've used at our elementaries and middle schools thus far this year. A is in school Monday, Thursday, and B in school on Tuesday and Friday. At Deering, the in-person schedule spans from 9:30 to 2:55 and ends slightly early so that they can provide fully remote blocks dedicated to fully remote students. They additionally are providing time on Wednesdays for remote blocks to be able to support the remote learners. So primarily students remote students will be accessing support through those periods, as opposed to the, synchronously with the in-person instruction. And as we've said, they're beginning their new schedule on this coming Monday, the 12th. At Portland High, they have a similar model in terms of their in-person days with the cohorts A and B as we've experienced this year. Their in-person schedule focuses in the morning on their core academic blocks from 9:30 to 1:05, and then continues some of the learning center structures in the afternoon to be able to provide additional in-person supports that have been valuable for many students, and we heard was a real benefit from students in our focus groups. At Portland High, they are going to be working to provide support for remote students by having them participate synchronously with the in-person students. Again, they're preparing to be able to launch their new schedule on this coming Monday, the 12th. At Adult Ed, in terms of finishing out this year, they are primarily remaining remote for their classes through the end of this year. They have been steadily increasing access to devices for students as the Chromebook orders have continued to come in, and they've been able to distribute them to some of their students. They are providing in-person supports for intake and testing, device and book distribution, and the onboarding of new students as they begin their experiences with Portland Adult Ed. They as well are doing deliberate planning for the fall to be able to increase in-person opportunities as appropriate, and may consider additional ones this spring based on need and how the conditions allow and what the opportunities are for outside learning, outdoor learning for them. Malia, do you want to talk about some of our program-specific things in this transition?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Aaron. So students in the IELD program will continue to receive 4 days of in-person learning like they've received in most schools all year. These students will continue to receive direct language instruction in their schedule, and schools are making specific adjustments that fit their context, so they will be communicating any changes or updates with families directly. And then in terms of special education for students with IEPs, they will be in person the same as their peers. And so for some, this means that things will remain the same because we'd already increased their in-person time. And for others, this will represent an increase in in-person time. And as always, we will continue to meet the needs as outlined in the IEPs. And then I'll speak a little bit to some calendar adjustments, a few things we wanted to highlight that we're doing in order to get prepared for these changes. At the high school level, teachers may be less available on the days listed here as they finalize their preparation. So some slight differences among schools, but you can kind of see here what they're doing. And then at the elementary and middle school level, we have a couple of adjustments that families should be aware of. First, the Wednesday before break, which is the 14th, students will not be assigned any work. And that's a remote day, but they won't get any new work, and teachers won't be expected to provide feedback that day. And then in addition to that, on Thursday, the 15th, we are going to make that a remote day for cohort A. And as a reminder, Friday, the 16th has always been a day off for all. So already cohort B was going to be off for that day. So this gives teachers the flexibility they need in order to make the final preparations to have everything all set for after our spring break. So those were just a few of the updates there. And I think, Aaron, back to you to close us out.
Thanks. Just a few other notes about some of the additional elements that we have been planning for as we increase in-person instruction. First, we remain committed to adhering to the 6 core state and federal guidelines around health and safety. Masks will continue to be expected to be worn by all students and staff, regardless of vaccination status. We will continue to use the physical distancing guidance that has been provided. We appreciate the collaboration with PEA and the EdTech units to revise the guidance in our MOU in accordance with the recent CDC updates, so that our middle schools, where we are able to maintain a cohorted model, are able to go to the 3 feet distance. High schools will be remaining at 6 feet physical distance because we're not able to cohort those upper grades. And per the federal criteria and the guidance, we continue to remain consistently in that high transmission zone where cohorting would be expected for physical distancing. Where cohorting would be expected if we are not able, where cohorting would be expected so that, if we wanted to attempt to maintain the 3 foot distance. In addition, we'll continue to emphasize the home symptom checks by families and ask all to stay home if they have symptoms, and to continue to contact and work with our school nurses for guidance and access and support for testing as needed, so that we can continue to ensure any existing cases are not providing exposure at school. However, we will continue to have to quarantine all unvaccinated staff and students for any exposures to a positive case. The state recently released guidance that allows for more precise designation of close contacts if classrooms are consistently using assigned seats, so that it is not necessarily that all people in a classroom would be considered close contacts. However, we will try and use that, that guidance appropriately, and there may be cases where it will still be inclusive of all students and staff in a classroom if they are not able to maintain those consistent assigned seats. Our transportation team has done an incredible job and exemplified our guiding principle of agility as they've planned for this increase. Most schools will now require double bus runs, which has been accounted for in our schedule from the beginning, though we have not had to utilize that at many of our schools. So as a result, this may mean some families may experience a later pickup than they have been accustomed to so far this year. We ask families to be patient for the first few days as we adjusted these new routines. We will continue with the same health and safety and capacity limits on our buses as we have been implementing throughout the year. Our food services team will continue to serve breakfast, snack, and lunch at all of our schools. And schools have done significant planning to make sure there are safe spaces for students to eat 6 feet apart at all of our schools, regardless of grade span. Lastly, as we have shared in some of our prior communications, we have paused any movement into or out of remote academy during this time so that schools have stable enrollment numbers to plan for in terms of space in classrooms during this transition. Lastly, our last couple slides here about the investments in terms of those, the significant, charge it is to be able to implement this, these changes, the 4-day model at middle and elementary and the 2-day model at high school. So we have had a significant increase in staffing, short-term staffing to finish out the year to support this transition. We have the need for a few additional teachers in some select classrooms where we're not able to accommodate the combined cohorts and must, and require an additional staff person to be able to maintain the physical distancing requirements when we combine the cohorts. Additionally, there are a number of additional support for ed techs, dedicated subs, and building aides to provide for the supervision and implementation of our health and safety protocols with significantly more students on campus, and in some cases to be able to provide the additional targeted supports that students require either per their IEP or our additional programs. Fortunately, our HR team has done an incredible job, and we've made significant progress on this hiring to date already. The food services staffing continues to remain our greatest concern, as those have been challenging positions to fill prior to the pandemic. If we are unable to finalize staffing at some levels to reopen safely, it may delay our reopening for those specific sites. And we'll continue to work hard to ensure we have all of the staff in place to be able to meet our target dates of reopening at all of our sites. Additionally, this scale up in terms of in-person time has required additional investments in these areas to accommodate the additional students on campus and to be able to maintain our health and safety protocols. So at a number of sites, we have had to acquire additional classroom furniture to be able to maximize spaces in our buildings and accommodate the full cohorts. We have invested in additional seating for our outdoor classrooms, which were initially designed for partial cohorts to now be able to accommodate full cohorts when they are on campus. And we have invested, as I mentioned in the last slide, in additional outdoor space with tents and folding chairs to provide sufficient safe spaces for eating. We have made additional technology investments as well, particularly at the high schools, to be able to support the remote learners, as I described earlier, so that they can be able to provide that synchronous access for our students. And additionally, schools have had some additional supplies needs to be able to accommodate these increases to in-person learning and to be able to safely implement our protocols. Lastly, as is indicated here, we are continuing to pursue some potential storage solutions for some sites that do not have capacity on site to store some of their furniture as they seek to maximize the capacity in their building to be able to accommodate in-person learning. We do anticipate, so these right now are our current projected costs. Kathy and the fiscal team has been doing an incredible job of managing both our budget development process and responding to these immediate needs. And these are initial projections of what we have identified thus far, though this may evolve as we finalize our planning and get through our first few days of implementation. As Malia shared earlier, all of this work and these investments reflect the significant effort and resources required to accomplish this increase of the 4-day model at elementary and middle and the 2-day hybrid model at the high school. We believe, though, that we can make this adjustment now and accomplish this and realize the benefits that in-person learning, we believe in-person learning will provide, and that it'll provide us invaluable insight into our needs for the fall so that we can be prepared for the full return of all students and be able to plan for that and be ready when the first day of school arrives in September or August, actually. So that reflects our work to increase in-person learning for this spring. Before we pause, I'd like to appreciate Lance Johnson, co-curricular director at Portland High, and Michael Daly, co-curricular director at Deering High School, to share a little bit about the plans for the spring co-curriculars. So I'll share that, and Michael and Lance, go ahead.
Thank you, Aaron, and hello, board. Good to see everybody again. So I'll cover the first part, a little bit of a overview of our winter high school athletics summary at Portland High School, Deering High School, and with Cascade Bay students as well. So there was two different competitive seasons this year. It was Winter 1 and Winter 2. Winter 1, we offered boys and girls basketball, boys and girls ice hockey, boys and girls swimming, and our new co-op program was a huge success, so thank you all. That went very, very well. Nordic skiing had another great year, cheerleading, and indoor track and field. And so we had a couple asterisks there. For boys and girls swimming and cheerleading, they had virtual competition only, and indoor track and wrestling, as we'll get to in a sec, had no competition, and we'll detail that in a second. The competitive season for Winter 2, which was a different one this year, was what we call a wedge season. It was in between winter and spring. So it actually really didn't stop sports. It just kept going right into girls volleyball, unified basketball, and wrestling. And as you can see with wrestling there, again, wrestling, because of the high-risk nature of the sport, there was no competition at all, only workouts and practices. And again, for indoor track, there was no competition, but that had to do with facilities. There were no tracks available in order to have track meets. They were all closed in the state of Maine, and they just started opening up for the colleges. Winter 1 season final games, March 13th was that final date. Winter 2 final games just finishing this week. We had Unified today at Yarmouth, and then we have volleyball finishing up on Thursday. Some of the highlights: basketball and ice hockey played 9 to 10 competition dates and games, and that was Winter 1. Nordic, swimming, and Unified basketball all had 5 competition dates and matches. And again, Nordic obviously was the only sport during winter that was outdoors. Girls volleyball had 7 matches, and cheer had 3 virtual competitions. So cheer actually had this really kind of cool virtual season of 3 competitions where they videotaped it and then submitted it, and then it got judged later on, and then they live streamed it and broadcast it. So it was kind of a good format. Next slide, please. So for the spring protocols, and Lance will speak about this a little bit too, for all participants, athletes, coaches, officials, and administrators, they're all required to wear a mask properly at all times. That means over the mouth and the nose. And then they must use hand sanitizer upon entering the facility, during any breaks, and when leaving the facility. So anytime someone has a drink of water, has a snack, touches their mask, they're going to have to put their mask back on and sanitize their hands and clean off. And if they have any equipment like a lacrosse stick, they're going to sanitize that as well whenever that happens. At every facility, we have sanitizer and wipes as well. So if you need a lacrosse stick to be wiped down after touching water or eating something, we have that as well. And our athletic trainers have done a great job with that. They all have to remain physically distanced whenever possible, 6 feet or more. And especially in the bench areas, the players are at least 6 feet apart, and they have their bags and equipment 6 feet or more apart. And the coaches have done a great job of that. They all have to bring their own water bottle. There are no cups, and so they have to put their name on the water bottle. We'll provide water bottles to kids if they don't have any, and for coaches as well. We just need to make sure they identify it and don't share water bottles. There's really no common source of water. They have to fill up their water bottle before a practice or a game. Everyone has to complete a daily COVID-19 health screening through Google Classroom, and any concerns that they have when they fill that out, they have to report immediately to their coach, the athletic trainer, the school nurse, and then we go through our protocols from there, as well as the co-curricular director. No locker rooms are being used. All participants must come prepared and leave as soon as practice or the contest is over. So that's for visitors, or for our teams. There are no locker room facilities at all for any sport, for any team available in the spring. So everything will be outside. And even in the team areas, there's some team areas that those will only be used for shelter in the case of emergency or lightning, if we need to use it. Next slide. And so the third slide here is really what we're offering this spring. So we're offering baseball, softball, boys and girls tennis, outdoor track and field for boys and girls lacrosse, and esports is another season that's continuing in the spring as well. We started on March 29th. That's when they started all practices, which was the scheduled, and it was the regular date per the MPA schedule. So the only season that went or is going according to the regular plan, and I guess I use regular loosely, on the MPA calendar is spring sports. And so spring sports started the time it usually does. We had pitchers and catchers starting on March 22nd as well for baseball and softball. April 26th is just a new sport that we're going to try out for Unified. That our Unified basketball team is one of the highlights of the whole athletic program at both Portland and Deering, and we had another great season, and those kids want more opportunities. So the MPA has added Unified Bocce, so we're going to try to make that happen this spring. So at every facility, Lance and I are working on finalizing the entry and the exit plans, and we'll share those with our teams and with the competitors and with the officials and anybody coming into the facilities. Athletic training areas have been moved to more open areas. We have isolation areas at all facilities, should we need to isolate anybody or a participant or a spectator. All spring sports have been modified for safety purposes by the MPA. There's probably 90 pages of documentation on all the changes in all spring sports. It's very particular per sport. So baseball, the pitcher can't have a mask that's white or gray because that would hide the ball. Softball, it can't be yellow because, again, that would hide the ball. So there's a lot of peculiarities for every sport in the rules that have been changed. Spectators are permitted as of March 26th at 50% capacity of the facility, maintaining 6-foot social distancing, and they must all wear masks. That increases to 75% on May 24th later in the season. This will be new for us. We have not had spectators all year. So Lance and I will be putting our plans together for our facilities and probably using a lot more event staff from the city and at our schools to manage the process of our home events and having spectators again. And lastly, middle school offerings. Intramural sports is what the middle schools will be offering. The plans and the timing for that are still to be determined. And I'll hand it over to Lance to finish up.
Thank you, folks. It's good to see everybody again. And thank you, Aaron and Malia and Javier, for all your hard work and for the stress that you've been under for the whole year dealing with the COVID crisis. So kudos to all of you folks. So we have had meetings to go over sports health protocols and expectations for our athletes. And we're going to try and minimize as much as we can any time indoors. We want the athletes outdoors. There will be times where both our baseball teams play at Hadlock and we can't take batting practice. They may use the cages in the basement of the expo. But as much as we can, we're going to keep the athletes outside in the fresh air. Masking, physical distancing, we are really two huge priorities for us. Keeping the mask over the nose and the mouth, staying physically distanced whenever it's possible. And we're really committed to providing our expectations to visiting teams as well as our own teams and coaches. And if people aren't following the protocols, then we're going to stop contests and get people to follow the protocols. And if we have to, we'll just end the practice or the game. Spectators are being allowed this spring. But we're going to follow the governor's order on gathering limits. So we'll have those for our facilities. Some of our facilities are difficult because they're parks. We'll play tennis in the park and softball in the park. And, but we're going to manage those as best we can and be visible and be asking the spectators to, they aren't required to wear a mask, but they're required to wear a face covering. And family units can be together, but everyone else needs to be physically distanced 6 feet. So we'll be encouraging that. Aaron's already written us a letter to share with our teams and our parents and our fans in Portland to make sure that they understand what our expectations are. I'm going to make some lawn signs to be put up and have signage. To make sure that everyone knows the importance of that to continuing our programs this spring and to continue to allow spectators to come to the games and watch our student athletes participate. And as far as spring sports, it's been a priority for the MPA and it's been a priority for the ADs in the state of Maine to provide as normal a spring as possible for our student athletes because they missed last spring. We had no sports at all for any of our student athletes. So there's a full allotment of games for all spring sports. Baseball and softball will play 16 games, and lacrosse teams will play 12. Tennis teams will have 12 matches, just like a normal spring season. The MPA has made the spring sports open tournaments this spring, so that it means that every team will make the playoffs. So every team will have a chance to compete in the playoffs in the state of Maine, and we're going to have state championships in all of our sports. The state of Maine has allowed travel throughout the state, so we'll be able to have state championships and final competitions in the end of May and into early June. At this time, there are no New England or national championships scheduled. I'm not aware of any teams in Maine that have competed in a New England or national a championship type of event. The New England track and field championships have already been canceled. So as of now, there's no plan to travel outside of the state of Maine for any of our sports teams. And I think that wraps up our presentation on athletics. And thank you for having us tonight. We appreciate the time.
Thank you, Michael and Lance, for joining us this evening. Appreciate you guys being here and recognize you're both still in your buildings. So the life of co-curricular directors going on and on and on. So I appreciate all that you do to make these things available for our students in these kinds of experiences. I want to also just last before we close, just clarify on the middle schools. The Cumberland County Superintendents recently came to agreement that there wouldn't be competition across cities, but for middle schools, there were a number of concerns across the region around stress on transportation in particular, as districts are increasing in-person instruction and trying to be able to accommodate even the high school varsity sports. So there was an agreement there. However, we are very confident in our middle school staff and the opportunities they've provided students. So they are working on, as Michael shared, kind of a schedule for offerings for students that will allow them to play one another within the city. So there will be the opportunity for some competition within their intramural structure to be able to play sports across, King, Lincoln, and more, and have some competition opportunities through that. So thank you all very much. We're excited about these opportunities for students and staff and hope that this can bring us to a bit more of a kind of normal conclusion to the year, in the context that we can, and provide for some joy as we wrap up this year after such a significant, and challenging year for everybody.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
A couple of hands up, so we should probably take questions, and then I'll wrap up my report.
Excellent. Thank you. Ms. Bondo, go ahead with your question or comment.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, team, for that great presentation. And I think that's a good start. At least we know how to prepare ourselves for fall. So I have a few questions. Do we know from now how many students are going to be returning in person versus the one will stay remotely?
At the high school level, Ms. Bondo,
yes.
You're asking? I don't have that number on hand, but we could get you to that number.
Okay. And on the elementary school and middle school, because we're moving to 4 days, are we see any shifts on some of those parents who decide to bring this, their children back to the in-person versus just staying remote?
Well, we have, so that the school leaders could plan for their classrooms and know how many students are there, because in a number of our buildings, space is at an absolute premium. We have paused any movement between remote academy and the in-person programming at elementary and middle, so that we can make this transition and make sure that we can safely accommodate the students that are currently in the in-person hybrid program. So right now at elementary and middle, there is not movement in between remote academy and in-person.
In-person, okay, thank you. So when you mentioned about the transportation, that's for the district. For now, like we're gonna have the high school returning, do we have any transportation with the metro collaboration happening?
Yep. Yes. The superintendent and I met with the transportation team there at Metro. They've been provided all these schedules. They've been making some route adjustments. I've been having some additional follow-up since then around tweaking some particular concerns of routes for students to make sure that students are going to get there on time. So Metro is kind of ramping up a bit like the first day of school to have additional buses on hand on Monday to be able to make sure from a capacity perspective they have sufficient buses to get everybody there who's going to need it. So they have been great in terms of really being flexible and accommodating with these changes in schedule.
Okay. All right, that's great. That's good to know. And for the community partner options, if I remember my notes, the priority that we had for the slots than we had with our partner was mostly prioritized to our staff. I mean, our staff children. So what is going to happen, because we're going to have some staff returning, so are we going to give more priority to our staff families to attend the community partner before and after school?
I mean, we're looking at who's in the programs now and talking with the community partners about how to adjust schedules to line up with the new schedule. So I don't think we're talking about a different prioritization. I do think there might be some changes in terms of what families need with this new schedule. So that's why we're trying to understand both what's possible for transportation midday, as well as, tracking on things like the fact that we do have a wait list at rec at a few schools. And so there's some unmet needs there. So that's how we're kind of approaching it, but we're not doing a different kind of prioritization process at this point.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. And my last question is that I saw the Deering, I just want to understand the remote block. Do that one replace the learning center, or you just another? Can you just explain to me, Aaron, about the remote block from the Deering High School? Because I saw at Portland High School, they have a learning center. So I just want to understand if the same way, but just the wording different on the remote block.
No, it is a little bit different. At Deering, the class periods are a little bit longer. So the kind of vision there is that they'll be able to meet students' needs by having the core classes be a little bit longer. So there isn't the same learning center structure that has been and that will continue at Portland High. They have time blocked at the end of the day because the school day goes to 3:30, where the remote classes will meet, and it'll be dedicated just solely for students who are fully virtual, so that they can get that focus time. I think one of the things that we've heard from many of our teachers in our district and have observed from high schools around the region is nobody's figured out the best way to manage the remote model. And so, I think we all have a great opportunity to learn across our schools in terms of how to most effectively do this. So at Deering, they are by and large focused on, when the students are in person, focused on teaching those students in front of them. And then they'll support the virtual students during those remote blocks at the end of the day. And then again, for some time on Wednesday mornings.
Okay, great. For the adult education, I heard you say about the device then we've been giving to some of the students. Our goal is to have each student with each one device, or is going to be a selective?
They have been trying to ramp up their capacity and focusing on the core academic programs as the first place to be able to provide access. And then expanding that as we're able. So, we're not yet at one-to-one there, but I'm trying to prioritize devices for the academic programs.
Okay, good. So I just want to have a clarification on the investment, the LTC before the teachers and the ATEC. What that one stand for? The LTS?
Long-term sub.
Long-term sub.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm done, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bonjo. Ms. Russell-Better.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Michael and Lance and Aaron and Malia for the presentation, and clearly your ongoing, throughout the year, your ongoing creativity and extensive and thoughtful planning, and particularly in this stage. So I just wanted to appreciate that. I just had a couple questions about specifically elementary level. Maybe this is middle school too, but just in looking at the increase to 4 days, I just wasn't clear. Aaron, you did mention at the end of, I think in the last piece you were highlighting about changes. There was something about lunch and snack, and I was under the impression that all the elementary schools hadn't been doing lunch, so that's a change. Is that correct, or has that been different at each school about having lunch?
The elementary schools' lunch has been grab and go, so
Yes.
in person been doing breakfast when kids arrive, and then snack during the day, and lunch has been grab and
So
go.
will that be a change? I mean, because the time isn't changing, but is lunch going to be? Okay.
No, the meal service will still be the same.
Oh, okay. So it still is to grab and go. I think maybe something you said about space, I was connecting with lunch, but that is not going to be a change, that eating is going to be happening in
Right.
the day. Okay.
But to be able for folks to be able to eat snack safely,
Yeah.
there's still additional space. So again, it's a trial run for us around what it might look like for us to be able to do lunch in the fall. So
Okay. Okay, thanks. And then I think I was just trying to picture, and also knowing that every building is different. Like, so my child, one of my kids goes to rec after, so they eat lunch there. Now, has the space for that? Does that seem to be doable with the amount of bodies and the amount of space, like to be eating there? Because that's going to be many more bodies now having to eat, right? Does that seem to be different in each building, how that's being managed, or is that seeming to be challenging space-wise? And
I mean, my understanding, Amelia, is that is part of their planning constraints, right? In terms of their ability, so they are planning on, if students are going to stay from their in-person day into rec, that they will need to eat lunch, and so both space and staffing as some of those constraints. And as Malia mentioned, a number of sites have that dialed in. Staffing, I think, is the greatest concern beyond, because they'll be able to take advantage of, various spaces in the building, the outdoor spaces.
Outdoor, yeah.
So I think it's really a staffing challenge primarily for rec to be able to do.
Okay, thank you. And then my one other piece was just, I'm imagining that the number of students in a class, in a cohort throughout the different buildings is different, but if I'm guessing that there's been 8 to 10 students, say at elementary level, and then say that is a potential of 20 kids in a space, I'm just curious, like thinking about at Presumpscot with modular buildings, like I'm just thinking about spaces like that, have there had to be like creative, I mean, I know outdoor classrooms, I mean, especially as it's getting warmer, but I was just curious about those kind of constraints with space. I'm having a hard time picturing that challenge.
And again, this is why it's going to be super useful for us to be able to work through this. I mean, the school leaders, as well with their teachers on the ground, have been doing incredible work to try and dial in exactly how many students they can fit in the space. And that's why we've had some different furniture, moving lots of things that traditionally were in the classroom out of the classroom. So that's some of those storage needs. So it will be different for sure. And we definitely have some cases, some classrooms that in which it'll be more challenging and, where it couldn't fit. Thus the need in some instances for an additional long-term sub teacher because you couldn't fit everybody. And so they were having to establish kind of an additional cohort or class.
Okay, so that might happen in some, that there would be an additional. Well, that's helpful when you're talking about the storage and moving. I didn't understand the importance of that, but now when you said that, moving things out to create space and knowing how many bodies you have to fit, that makes sense.
An example might be kind of the classic, like they're called kidney tables that often were a staple of elementary school classrooms. In many instances when trying to get everybody in, things like that are needed to be moved out and not things we want to get rid of because we want to be able to utilize those again. So having to figure out these storage solutions.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'm so grateful that in that planning that you've been doing, making that space for staff the week before vacation too, as we're talking about all those details that have to be worked out so that those spaces are prepared. So I appreciate that staff is going to have a little space to really focus on that and make sure they feel prepared. So I'm pleased that that planning time is there for them. So thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Mr. Youssef.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Thank you, Aaron and Malia, also Michael and Lance. My question is, maybe I'm not fully understand when you talk about one of the slides about one school respond 80% and the other 10% for the teachers to prefer. You also mentioned the student feedback and families feedback. Are those also vary, or there's a pattern you find out that everybody prefers to go back to school?
I can start with that one. So I was giving the example of the 80 and the 10%, where when we worked through the leadership teams at the schools. Administrators got input from teachers in different ways. Some of them surveyed all of the educators in the building and asked them for their perspectives on those 5 prototypes we started with of just increasing the length of the day, but staying in cohorts, going to 4 days, all the different options. And so a handful of schools got survey data from teachers, and that's where I kind of plucked that example from, because we got all the feedback and we read all of it to understand, what schools and teachers were thinking about, what could work and what would be best for students. So I was just sharing that when we got all of that feedback, it was clear that people believed in the need for increasing in-person learning. Like that was generally something that people thought would be best and better for kids. But then how to go about it, different people and the different schools leaned in different ways. And usually it was based on schools that had the easiest way to do it with the health and safety parameters, felt most confident, and schools that truly do have the biggest obstacles that we're working through were the ones that were more trepidatious about it. But that's what that was. So, and I'm just being transparent that, not every school was feeling immediately like, yes, this is what we should do. So we had to really look at the full picture and all the data and grapple with that and ultimately make a decision we thought was best for students and something that we could still, manage and pull off. And then in terms of the other feedback, the family feedback, we don't have the same kind of X% at every grade span said this thing because we were looking at different data sources. We were looking at a lot of feedback coming up through our POSSUP survey, that biweekly survey that's like a quick pulse check for families, like a strong leaning across all the feedback we were getting through you all, through principals, directly from parents. And then we did some focus groups with multilingual families in particular, where we were just trying to ask deeper questions about it. And so all of those sources of information led us to where we've landed in terms of our recommendation.
Thank you, Melly. I'm done. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Youssef. If there aren't any other questions from the board, I had one remaining question, which is just understanding where the additional, in terms of the additional staff and other investments that are needed in order to see this plan through, what pots of money those are coming from. I assume we're using federal money for these costs, and it would just be helpful to hear a little bit more detail on that.
You want me to take that, folks? So, I think it is federal money. We're primarily using the resources that are part of the SRF 2 grant, so the December relief package. And so there, if you recall, associated with the budget, there is an amount out of that funding that we have earmarked for supporting the summer school that we talked about, as well as some of the other initiatives associated with our equity work, mainly those sort of one-time capacity building investments. And there was about $1 million that we did not allocate from that amount, from the $7 million that was in that relief package. And so that is the money that we're envisioning using for the reopening. So we had basically $1 million set aside for that purpose. We may still have some additional funding in our CRF that we can use for this, and we will sort of obviously max that out so that we're able to preserve as much of the ESSER funding that can be used over a number of years as possible, since the CRF money runs its course at the end of June. But that's the way that we're approaching it.
Excellent. That's what I was thinking. Thank you. But it's helpful to hear that detail. Thank you. And Mr. Youssef, your hand is still up. Did you have other questions? And I'm sorry, so sorry if I cut you off.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, and are there are no other questions from the board? Okay. Do you want to close this out?
Sure. So as you heard, there's a tremendous amount of work that has gone into this increase in in-person instruction. We remain with work to be done, and we will be continuing to ensure that we are able to do all of the things that we've committed to doing before we actually bring students back. We also remain concerned about the steady pace of COVID cases in the area. And I want to be clear that we will continue to lead with evidence and are committed to keeping our students and staff safe. I really can't stress enough how important it is for everyone to continue to enforce and abide by our health and safety measures, including masking and physical distancing. For those who are eligible, please take advantage of the opportunity to get vaccinated. Only by continuing our vigilance and commitment to keeping each other safe will we be able to return all of our students to in-person instruction next school year, as well as keep our successful hybrid implementation going through the end of the school year. So thank you to everyone who has done a tremendous amount of work to get us to this point. And let's just stay vigilant and support each other. And that concludes my report.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move to the report of the secretary, consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of March 16th, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Rodriguez, seconded by Mr. Youssef. Are there any questions on the motion? Is there any public comment on the motion? Again, this is a motion to approve our meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was March 16th, 2021. Seeing no public comment, is there board discussion on the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, seeing no board discussion, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you're in favor of approving our meeting minutes from March 16, 2021. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Irish? Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Russell-Better?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Allen? Ms. Boxer-McCumber?
Yes.
Ms. Hill? Ms. Yangala?
Yes.
And Chair Figdor?
Yes. The motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. Now we're on to consent items. Will the superintendent speak to this item, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district as required by that policy. All of the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. Our practice is for each donor to receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value, and historical or commemorative significance, including 40 neck warmers and 45 ear warmers, all handmade from United Way of Greater Portland to support outdoor learning, $200 from April and Dennis Noonan to restock the food pantry, and balsa wood airplane kits for use in fourth grade science valued at $400 from Ed Cormier of the Federal Aviation Administration's National Engagement and Regional Administration Office of Policy, International Affairs, and Environment. We're very grateful for their generous support and contributions to the work of the Portland Public Schools.
Thank you so much. Now we're on to old business. Consideration and action to approve the Portland Adult Education School Year 2021-2022 calendar. Is there a motion?
Move.
Ms. Bondo, seconded by Mr. Youssef. Mr. Superintendent, will you please speak to this motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. Tonight, we're asking you to approve the proposed Portland Adult Education calendar for the 21-22 school year. As it normally does, this calendar tracks closely with the standard calendar and is similar to the 2021 calendar. Portland Adult Education typically starts classes 1 week after Portland Public Schools open to allow the many students who are parents of PPS students to get their children settled before they begin classes themselves. For similar reasons, they take the same school holiday weeks off. Portland Adult Ed has 3 semesters. Fall and winter are both 12 weeks long, and the spring semester is 9 weeks long. But some of the workforce classes are of different lengths. So we ask for your approval of the calendar today.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay, seeing no questions from the board, we're going to move to public comment. Is there any public comment on the motion? So this is a motion to approve the Portland Adult Ed calendar for the upcoming school year. And if there's public comment, you can indicate it that you want to speak to the board by using the raise your hand feature on Zoom. Okay, seeing no public comment on the motion, is there any board discussion? All right, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of approving the Portland Adult Ed school year 2021 to 2022 calendar. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Spondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Irish?
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Boxer McCumber?
Yes.
Ms. Yangala?
Yes.
And Chair Figdor?
Yes. The motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. Now we're on to consideration and action to approve the request to bid renovations at Presumpscot Elementary School as part of the Buildings for Our Future referendum. Is there a motion? Ms. Russell-Vetter. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Trevorrow. Thank you, Ms. Trevorrow. Mr. Superintendent, will you please speak to this motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. In 2017, Portland voters approved a $64 million referendum to renovate Lycett, Presumpscot, Reiki, and Longfellow elementary schools as part of the district's Buildings for Our Future effort. In the spring of 2018, the Board of Education developed a governance structure for the oversight of the BFOF projects. Under that governance agreement, the board retains its fiduciary and policy responsibility over the projects, but creates a structure for deeper understanding and collaboration that includes a district advisory building committee for all 4 projects and a school-specific building level advisory committee, a BLAC, for each individual projects. Both groups are constituted with a mix of elected officials and community representatives with the appropriate knowledge of the project, and a commitment to assisting to make the project succeed. In summer of 2019, staff in consultation with community members on the DABC selected Harriman as the architect and engineer for the Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reiki school renovation projects. And Harriman's staff, who are here with us today, working with staff, community members, and members of both the District Advisory Building Committee and the Building Level Advisory Committee for Presumpscot, have developed a detailed plan for the school's renovation. This proposal was vetted and developed with guidance from 3 community forums, multiple meetings with school and district staff and stakeholders, as well as members of the DABC and the Presumpscot BLAC. The project represents a scaled-back interpretation of the conceptual documents that were developed during the BFOF design phase, and the scaling back allows the project to retain many of the key features in the original design while maintaining the financial viability of the 4 BFOF school projects that were approved by Portland voters. The design for Presumpscot Elementary has been reviewed, as I mentioned earlier, in anticipation of this board approval process. The board reviewed this plan during a first read and workshop on March 16th, and today we are asking you to approve it. Board action will allow Harriman and staff to draw up contractor specifications and solicit bids for an anticipated summer of 2021 construction start. A few noted items: as with the Lyseth construction contract, this plan is designed to conform to fair contracting practices consistent with Maine law. This represents an affirmative step on the part of the board, as these practices were not originally required in locally funded projects, but many of them are now required under the recent passage by the Portland voters of the Green Ordinance that has institutionalized and expanded these requirements into all city contracts exceeding $50,000. The plan as proposed adheres to the spirit of the renovations developed in consultation with the board, the DABC and BLAC, known as Scenario 1 classrooms. This was presented to the board during a workshop back in March of 2020. And this project at Presumpscot includes the construction of a new single-story administrative and nurse addition with a secure front entry, as well as a larger addition on the back of the school containing classrooms for pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, art and music, specialist support spaces, and a new cafeteria and warming kitchen. All portable classrooms currently on site will be removed from the site. Portions of the existing building will receive light renovation, including spaces for special services integrated into the academic wings to support an inclusion model. Durable materials will be used throughout all public and high traffic areas of the newly constructed and renovated parts of the building. All 4 of the BFOF elementary school projects are designed to meet LEED, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, Silver guidelines. The 3 schools, including Presumpscot, will be submitted to the United States Green Council for LEED certification, and this rating system considers the energy efficiency and sustainable features in the design of the school. The 3 school construction projects, of which Presumpscot is the last one, will solicit contractor bids separately from a list of pre-qualified general contractors with demonstrated experience and capacity to perform the work. The pre-qualified contractors will be allowed to bid on any or all of the school renovations, and the solicitation of bids, as you know now, is sequential to allow the contractors to the opportunity to bid on successive projects. As you know, we currently have the Longfellow School bid out. That was originally scheduled to be open last Friday, but was delayed in being issued, and the timeline was extended. We expect those bids back on Thursday, April 15th. Reiche's bid authorization was at the last board meeting and will be issued shortly. And Presumpscot is currently scheduled to be issued on April 26th and open in late May. As I noted earlier, all 3 projects are scheduled to break ground when school ends in June. And so with that, I would like to ask for your approval.
Thank you so much, Mr. Superintendent. Are there questions on the motion? Seeing no questions from the board, we're going to move to public comment. Is there public comment on the motion? This is to approve the bid for the renovations at Presumpscot School. And if you'd like to speak on the motion, you can use the raise your hand function in Zoom, and I'll go ahead and call on you, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Okay, seeing no public comment, we're going to move to board discussion. Any discussion on this motion? All right, I think we've pretty fully considered this this bid in a very extensive process. I think I'll just add very briefly that I can remember, years ago now, meeting with the former principal, Cindy Loring, at Presumpscot and touring the school with her and a whole set of folks from the community as she highlighted all of the ways in which the school needed to be renovated to meet 21st century educational standards. It's been a long time since that meeting now, years ago, and so many people, including Ms. Russell-Better, have had a hand in getting this project to this stage. So I just want to thank everyone who's had a hand in moving this project forward and ensuring that the kids who go to Presumpscot School can go to a 21st century school. And it's honestly just thrilling to hear the words "no more portables." So thank you to our facilities staff, to Doug Sherwood and Steve Stilfen, to the whole Harriman team, Lisa and Mark and Emily, and to the superintendent for shepherding these projects through in the midst of everything that is happening, including a pandemic. And I do see Ms. Russell-Better has her hand up. So Ms. Russell-Better.
Thank you, Chair. You said most of what I wanted to say, but I just wanted to add, I'm pinching myself because it's just like really happening, really exciting. But I just wanted to highlight, I would love if we could invite Cindy Loring and maybe Beth Linovich to this groundbreaking when this happens, because I was thinking of those modulars and staff who've been in those for many, many years, and Beth Linovich was one of them who I think would just love to be there to actually see this coming to fruition. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Just thinking of all the people in our community who've worked for this and hoped for this for many years. So thank you for highlighting them, and thank you to Harriman and everybody who's been involved with this for the long haul. Super, super exciting. Oh, and we had our family council meeting last week, our PTO, and so many parents and staff just so excited this is really happening, and getting to see some of the, the layout of what it's going to look like, and that it's really feeling real. I just wanted to share that there was a lot of excitement about that. So thanks, everybody.
We will definitely invite Cindy and Beth to the groundbreaking. So will be big celebrations. With that, if there isn't any other board discussion, let's move to a vote. So by roll call, please indicate whether you are in favor of approving the request to bid the renovations at the Presumpscot Elementary School as part of the Buildings for Our Future referendum. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Irish? Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Russell-Better?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson? I'm sorry, Mr. Varro?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Yangala?
Yes.
And Chair Figdor?
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with students voting with the majority. So now we are on to new business, and tonight we have just one first read, and it's our budget. So it's the first read to adopt the FY22 budget in the amount of $125,815,760. There is no board, there aren't board questions or discussion on first reads, nor is there public comment. So we are now at personnel items. Consideration and action to renew the contracts of principals for the 2021-2022 school year who have been employed for more than 2 years. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, seconded by Mr. Burke. Ms. Stoddard, would you like to speak to this motion?
Can I just say something quickly before speaks? So as you know, we're asking you to approve the renewal of contracts for principals and assistant principals, and this is an annual action that's required by state law. And, you know, as such, sometimes it's perfunctory and we don't really pause to place it in the appropriate context. But I would like to take a moment to do that. The principal's job is one of the most important and difficult roles in education. You're literally at the intersection of competing and often conflicting interests, trying to build a successful school culture focused on meeting the needs of all students in an environment where you have sometimes very little control over many of the key policies, resources, and other important aspects of your work. Portland principals are an outstanding group of professionals, and never has their work been more challenging than over the past year, as they have seen all of those complexities that I referred to magnified by the pandemic. I'm incredibly proud of this team and so grateful to each and every one of them for their passion, commitment, and the dedication that they bring to their work every day, day in and day out, year over year. So I just wanted to say that before Barb speaks to the request.
So very appropriate. Thank you so much. Ms. Stoddard.
I agree. It's an honor to work with these folks and to serve them. So tonight we're bringing forward on a bit of a delayed schedule, but we're no less enthusiastic about the incredible slate of administrators that we are putting forward for renewal this evening. We're asking you to renew the contracts in two separate groups that are presented in the package. You'll first vote on those that have been employed for more than 2 years, and then for those that have been employed for 2 years or less. This vote is required per statute, and the first group that you are being asked to renew by affirmative vote are those that have been employed for more than 2 years. So I'll turn it back to the chair for a vote.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay, there isn't public comment on personnel items. So I see Mr. Rodriguez has his hand up. For board discussion or for a question? Board discussion.
For board discussion.
Go ahead, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to also say that I agree completely with the superintendent's comments about our administrators. You know, 5 years serving on this board, I've had the great pleasure to work with many of them on many issues, and obviously we've seen them here on the board present and share with us the progress that they've made in their individual buildings, advancing many of the interventions that we as a board have asked them to put forward. So I want to thank them as well, and appreciate that the superintendent took the time to acknowledge the contributions of our administrators. We are incredibly fortunate to have such an amazing group of administrators and leaders in our school buildings. So again, just want to thank the superintendent for pointing it out, and of course the administrators for their work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez. Is there any other board discussion? Okay, please indicate whether you are in favor of approving the personnel item, renewal of contracts for principals for the 2021-2022 school year who have been employed for more than 2 years. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
A quick question, Barb. Are we approving all of them, or are we just approving the 1 year contracts and then we have to take a separate vote on the other one?
Two separate votes.
Okay, all right. So this is for the principals who have been with us for more than 2 years. Okay, Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Irish? I don't see Mr. Irish. Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Russell-Better?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Yangala,
Yes.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. Now we're on to consideration and action to renew the contracts of principals for the 2021-2022 school year who have been employed for less than 2 years. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevero, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Stoddard, did you want to speak to this motion, or
You're really all set. It's that you are voting on people who have been employed for 2 years or less.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, are there any questions on this motion? There is no public comment on personnel items, so I'm going to move back to board discussion, and Mr. Rodriguez, go ahead.
I actually had a question. Sorry.
You missed your chance. Go ahead.
Barb, this question, I think you'll be the one to answer. Because these administrators were hired within the last 2 years, that's the time, that's within the time that we've been actively using our equity hiring toolkit. Could you, and I know that that there are some positions right now held by administrators that are not included here because they're not, well, anyways, could you speak to us just very briefly about how the equity hiring toolkit works when we are looking at administrators' positions? And I ask that because these positions probably don't come up as frequently as some of the other positions along the district. And them being key leaders, using the equity hiring toolkit obviously has great significance and value. So if you don't mind, just giving us a short, brief description. And I think the board is already familiar with this, but thought it would be a good opportunity to discuss it.
Javier, do you want to comment on that before I?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, so the toolkit has been used, we've trained hiring managers with it. We've been using it across the district. We're continuing to update it. And I would say that it is as important for these roles, if not more so, than any other roles in the district. It has been a priority of ours, obviously, to really get more focused on our teachers and our leaders, our building leaders, in terms of diversifying. And so, it's a work in progress. I can't tell you much more than that. Then we are actively recruiting and talking to candidates and looking at our internal candidates very closely.
Yeah, I said I wasn't going to comment, but I think I will. I do want to point out, that in the past couple of years, you've seen that we were able to hire an administrator of color at Deering High School, and we now have an interim administrator at Lyman Moore. I also want to point out that we are in the process of looking to hire a assistant principal for Deering High School, and that we have, to sort of Barb's point, we've done, and Barb gets the credit for this, a tremendous amount of work to recruit for that, and we have a robust pool that includes strong candidates who are people of color. And so really proud of the progress that we're making. This would not be possible without the work that has happened around the equity hiring toolkit and our commitment to trying to diversify our leadership in the district. And so I think that's that's, I think, what you're asking about, and I do think that we are making significant progress in that area.
Thank you, Superintendent. That is precisely why I asked and thought it'd be important to highlight it, because I do know that we have been very thoughtful and purposeful about using that equity hiring toolkit, and that specifically when we're working to promote from within our own ranks, right? When we're trying to provide the support to our staff members to grow professionally. So my question, by the way, if it wasn't clear, was to celebrate our work and to highlight it. Again, because we recognize that these positions are so critical, and not often do we get the opportunity to hire for them. And we did have, although not included in this particular list, we have had 2 very recent appointed people in administrative positions that reflect, advancing that goal, our people goal. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez. Is there any other board discussion on this motion? Okay, please indicate whether you are in favor of approving the personnel item, renewal of contracts for principals for the 2021-2022 school year who have been employed for less than 2 years. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair, Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Yangala,
Yes.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. So we are ready to adjourn. As a reminder to the board, we have an executive session immediately after we adjourn this business meeting. And you have a different link to use that Anne sent to you first thing this morning. I just checked, I received mine at 8:56 if you're searching your email. Anne was up and working early, right on the dot. Does the board want a few minutes to take a quick break before we go into executive session? I'm seeing heads nodding yes. So, and Anne's reminding me that yes, all the school employees start at 8. It's not my work schedule, so my apologies. So let's take a 7-minute break, if that's okay, and convene at 9:35 using the other link. Any questions or clarifications about that? Okay. So we're going to adjourn first.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah. So is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Ms. Russell Better, seconded by Ms. Trevorrow. All those in favor, you can indicate with a show of your hand. Okay, it is unanimous, and we are adjourned at 9:28 p.m.